Hello, welcome to Tuesday Connect, where truth meets life. This is season 6, episode 6. My name is Wilkista Ludenyi. I serve in Mamlaka Hill Chapel in the Young Adults Ministry, and I will be your host for today. And I'm joined by two people. I'll welcome them and allow them to introduce themselves before we start.
Hello, my name is Helen Kadu, and I serve here at Mamlaka Hill Chapel as in the Waridi ministry, and that is our women's ministry. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're watching us from. My name is Kadu. I am the adults pastor at Mamlaka Hill Chapel, and I'm so happy to be having this conversation.
You share a name?
Yeah. Somehow she uses my name.
Any reason? I don't know
why
adults ministry. Serving women and serving adults.
Ask her why she's using my name.
Mimo, are you related?
Well, we not only share a name, but I happen to be yours truly's husband, wife.
You identify as the wife of the Kadu.
I've always thought I'm the wife.
And for the purposes of this conversation, I'll just make it clear. They are married to each other, and I am not married for the purposes of this conversation. So our topic for today is we are trying to understand, is marriage overrated? So I guess as the one asking, what do you think people mean when they say that that marriage is overrated?
That's interesting. I guess that the people asking that question are not married, right?
Mostly, yeah.
But I would think if someone said a thing like that, I think they would mean that marriage is given undue attention. That marriage is sort of too elevated.
Yeah.
Marriage is given an importance and placed on a pedestal where it doesn't really sit at. I would guess that is what they mean.
So we've put it too higher than it ought to be.
I would guess that's what they mean.
Yeah, okay. And Mimo?
I would say that people look at they see people who are married, and they see the pictures of marriage, and they feel like it's not all that. Yeah. And sometimes it could be people who are outside looking in, and others who are already in and wondering, what did I get myself into? Yes. Yeah. So it can play either way.
So you've actually led us into an interesting place, and perhaps let me just go there. You're saying that there are elements of this statement, marriage is overrated, that is coming from those who are married. It's coming from those who are unmarried, and I guess just society at large. So perhaps we could start by the first one of those who are married. What are some of the things that married people do or say that might lead the unmarried to say marriage is overrated? Or even themselves saying marriage is overrated?
I would guess when people are in the institution of marriage, but not behaving it. Like
also
people who are married, but then you're still out there living and acting like you're single, not honoring your marital vows and things like that. And so people look at you and wonder, if this is what marriage is,
then I
might as well just be single.
Yeah.
And I mean, you hear a lot of such conversations out here. Yeah.
Yeah. What other things might married people be doing or saying that?
I think a lot of times people have watched movies and seen the happily ever after and wondered,
Hallmark movies.
Yeah, and
Christmas
they're like, yes, Christmas is coming.
Yeah,
it's the time in the season, and however, and we find that quite a number of the times, because marriage means that it's two people who are sinful and are sinners. In some can be in Christ and others not in Christ. However, when they live their lives in such a way that they hide the places where they find inefficiencies in each other, and so the people looking in, they're like, it's not all that, because these two people are clearly pretending to like what they have, and it's clearly rubbing on both of them, and it's not working out for them.
And so are there other things that the unmarried do that might, or say that might give us the impression that marriage is overrated?
It could also be the way society and culture as a whole has treated marriage.
Yeah.
like there is an expectation that you have to get married by a certain age. I mean, this is
I can confirm
December.
that is true.
Yeah, December. I'm sure when you go to your village, they'll be like, hey, Bana, and then, what are you doing wrong? And stuff like that, you know? Like, bring us the cows, man, bring us the kids. And so, it's not really about you, but what society wants, expects of you. And so, in that regard, people say, this thing is a little too much. Like, I can't just be complete without being married. Must I be defined by
whether I'm associated to a minister or a
exactly, you understand? So in that regard, the culture plays a big role. Yes.
And maybe let me just push on that, and because I feel like there's culture, and then there's Christian culture. Hey, I like.
Just say it.
Like church services, it would be long before the topic of marriage comes up over and over. And I'm wondering whether that is a telling of the ideal that we put marriage on as a church culture, or might I be feeling like you're overdoing it because maybe there's something within me that desires it, and I don't know what is that about. Why it seems like there is a difference between how the world does it than how churches do it.
Well, first of all, it would be hard to talk about a church culture, because there's no such thing as a church culture, unless you're talking a particular local church. I saw the other day a certain pastor giving an ultimatum. Saying, in 6 months, so maybe in a place like that. That can contribute to people saying this thing is overrated. But generally, I think the biblical worldview, the biblical culture, I don't think it really forces people into this thing. Even though marriage is held in high regard in the scriptures, there's no pressure to get married tomorrow.
And I also would say that a lot of times when we look at the Bible, we see the relationship between Christ and the church is always described as a marriage. And I think that in itself makes it feel like it's the cool thing to do. It's the Christian thing to do. It's the Christian thing to aim for. However, at the same time, I would say if there's something that God uses for sanctification of his people, is marriage. Two people, sinful as they are, getting married, and then at that point they are so blinded, they are just seeing stars in their eyes and thinking this one is for keeps, and then they discover who that both of them are sinful while they're in it, and they figure out, wow. And that becomes another story. And I think also there's a place where, in as much as the young people, when people are outside looking in, they're always thinking, and they feel the pressure. When they're in, there's still also pressure. Yes, because when you get in, there's another. I think the thing about both the Christian culture and both the African culture is that I think sometimes it just pushes people into the next. Okay, so you have children. So now, no, you have gotten married. So now the children, where are the grandchildren? It's almost like this is just the direct thing to have after. Yes.
And tied with that, actually, is are the myths that I think popular culture has attached to marriage. The myths of the happily ever after. And so you think, I'm going to get in this thing. No, I'm not saying it's not true. But if you are married, it'll take work for you to have a happily ever after. You understand? So in that regard, it becomes a myth, thinking that, we're going to all be, lovey-dovey, love each other, and everything is going to be, exactly, we're not going to be broke, we'll be having more money and stuff like that. And then on the ground,
literally different.
That's why you're taking
and so,
literally different.
And so they look at it, they're like, I know, but these guys promised us happily ever after. And then suddenly, so in that regard,
In other words, we're being cautious about those lines that men give. I'll give you the whole world.
No.
It's not practical.
No, it's not, man. It's just people believing. Look, I have my little money, you have your little money. When we come together, we have a bigger, and then
more people and more money.
But I think what I'm hearing, and perhaps the difference I am seeing with the culture at large, is while for Christians, there is that element of aiming for marriage, even in the romantic relationship. The world can have it differently. But I'm wondering, what are some of the consequences of when we think, if we do believe that marriage is overrated, what are some of the ways that plays out in how we do life?
I think one of them is that at the slightest conflict or at the slightest discomfort, one is out, one checks out, and they're like, I didn't sign up for this. So that becomes it becomes people who get into marriage, despite marriage being a covenant, people getting into marriage with a clause. I think sometimes they're called prenups and all this. There's always a clause somewhere hidden, like a hidden card in poker, just waiting for the right to be unleashed. And I think that then breaks the essence of what marriage should be.
So it kind of like becomes a contract that you can break anytime, as opposed to a covenant.
Yes.
Actually, the vows become in good and good.
Wealthy
and wealthy. In healthy and healthy.
It's happened.
And
it's
so,
not even a thought. It's some people have actually made those vows for richer and richer.
Exactly. But again, another consequence is come with stays. You want to test drive. Okay? This car before you buy it. So you've gone to the showroom, you've seen the car, you like it, you're taking a test drive. If it squeaks a little, you bring it back. And so there's a lot of come with stay marriages because people are not really
thinking that marriage is an important step to make.
Yes. So it's just a thing we want to toy around with, it's also given rise to just an under desire in marriage as a whole. The population and the percentage of single people, I think, is growing.
Yes,
by
that's
the day.
for sure. Yeah.
So a lot of people just don't believe in marriage. I was reading an article this morning, and this lady was giving a whole list of reasons why she'd never get married. Okay, and it all boils down to, look, marriage is overrated. I am good.
It's not all that.
Yes,
it's not adding
good.
any value to me.
It's not going to add any value to me, and so so a lot of come we stay marriages, and a lot of single people under desiring marriage. But on the other hand, are the people who are in it, who know how cool this institution is, and then they look from in and they're wondering what the fuss is about. And so they also end up looking down on those on the outside. Because you sort of judge this thing, you don't know what you're talking about, but somehow you've drawn conclusions, and you have your set ways, and you're not gonna risk, and so those who look down on these people thinking you have no idea what you're missing.
There's also, I've had examples where those who are in it, because they see how underwhelming it has become, they feed into the unmarried's under desire for marriage, because they're like, you don't need to be in a rush. It's not all that. You just make the most of your youth. Take your time. You don't have to get married.
Though I'd push back a little on that.
Yeah, please.
Because if someone is in need and you're holding such an attitude, then obviously you came into this thing unprepared.
Yeah.
Okay.
You are not really, and so you go in there and meet all sorts of drama, and you believed the myth of happily ever after, no struggles and stuff, and stuff like that. And so you want to sort of discourage people based on your own experience. We can't take two people having issues and make it a normative principle. No, for everyone else.
It's a big word you've dropped there.
Yeah, it can be globalized.
Should we give it a moment, Kadu? Normative principle. But we can continue.
I think as you were talking, I kept thinking of how many times we globalize. An analogy is given of a person who hurt their pinky finger, and they say, man, they're in pain, and they think that it's their whole body that is aching. Right. So it's necessarily doesn't one bad marriage that is ailing does not represent the picture of all. Yeah. However, God gives grace to all, so that now even for those who are in it are able to stick with it. Yeah. And I think also there's a place where people already have seen marriages, maybe their parents or the adults around them, they have seen marriages that don't work, or they have grown up in households that are totally dysfunctional, so that their view of marriage becomes so skewed. It either becomes it becomes about them, or it becomes I don't want it at all. So that now they are gallivanting from one relationship to the other, and it becomes, I think I have had people talk about things like friends with benefits and such very crazy ideas. However, how God created it is that marriage, the marriage institution is best enjoyed when two people are in covenant with one another, so that one is not feeling like they have been defrauded by the other in any way, so that it is mutually acceptable to both. Yes.
I guess from all you're saying, I'm hearing one, there's the element of marriage itself is a risk, because you are committing yourself to someone, one person, lifelong, and it's not just a contract, it's a covenant for that matter. So there's a high regard that, even as you had mentioned earlier, that scripture puts a high value on marriage, so that it's a good thing to desire marriage. But you're also saying that there are elements, those things that are risky in it should not keep us from them. So that even if it's a truth that I have seen my parents, or I know enough couples that are breaking apart, and it's not feeling, I still do not use that to justify my
fear for it.
Because I think
repulsion.
the repulsion is the word, because I think many people will not say they're afraid of marriage, but they are not quite interested in it based on what they will call facts, and the normative principles that they have seen around, but yet you're kind of asking us to push back on it in lens of scripture. Is that, am I getting it right?
Indeed. And probably allow me to just say, I think a lot of times, especially when people are single, it is so easy to think, probably, and this is an addition, it's not to continue the same point you're talking about, but in addition, that I am half and I will get another half.
To be made whole.
It should be made whole. But you see, it's not true. That is a total lie.
See, half is one whole.
She told me I made a whole.
Now, in as much
what you meant was,
I have no idea.
Kaju, don't throw me under the bus. However, what I meant, or what is meant by it, is two whole people coming together. Because the thing is, if there are things that you're struggling in before you get married and you don't deal with them, when you get in, it becomes a worse. You become worse. It doesn't make it any better. It's si pasi ati itanyorosha. Me, you come as a whole person, and then you add on to each other. And that's where the wholeness comes in. Yes, you make me whole, and
it is true after all.
It is true after all.
Just with the right perspective of how you went in.
Very true. And I would say I am a better person because of Kadu being in my life, and I pray that you are a better person because I'm in your life. Yes.
Back to what are you saying?
Now you've forgotten all your lines.
She's confused me.
Wow, it's good to know that 15 years later, the confusion is still present. I'd like to first direct this question to Mimo, because I think maybe it affects women more than men. And here I'm looking at within church, the things that we see. You've ever seen those conferences, prayer conference, to find a groom? Or there's this other meme. Because progress, you know how your parents keep asking, when are you getting married? I've already chosen a wedding date.
And a wedding dress.
And then the other reality of throughout history, the number of women in the church is, whether they're born again or not, that's another matter, but the number of women in the church are more than the number of men. In the young adults ministry, we will organize events, whether it's so that they can mingle or not. You will have more women showing up than men. Is there something that makes women maybe vulnerable to desiring marriage more than men? And is there any danger to how, because I think on the one hand, there's the challenge of being repulsed by marriage, but then there's also the other element of that we're talking about marriage. Sometimes it's because it has been idolized so much. Is there anything, do you think at all, that makes women more vulnerable to the desire for marriage than men?
I think,
if at all?
My thought is, and even as I was doing a bit of reading, I just came across the one idea that kept hanging, that kept playing in my head, was actually the idea of companionship. That all of us are born with a desire. Apart from marriage, there's a desire for worship.
Yeah.
So that now the desire for worship, it's either God or you're worshiping something totally different.
Yep.
And then apart from that, there's a desire for companionship, friendship. Yes. I think, and then also women, we want to, unataka mtu ambaye utashinda kama mnaongea. I think the one, and then he doesn't smile. Yeah,
give him a chance to respond, but
until then. Yeah. So that now, the desire to have a companion becomes an overriding desire, so that somebody is not even thinking, what is the character of this person? So that a lot of times it should be based, by the time somebody is choosing or is getting a spouse, they should consider greatly their character. And who is this person? What are they about? But sometimes you get to a place where when a lady feels like it's a little late in the day and I should have gotten married like ages ago. Yeah, suddenly any person who walks by and who seems to just notice, they feel like their heart jumps and they're like, maybe it's that one. And I think it's a wrong way to look at it. And it's not that. I think it's the desire to, could I say, copy, to be like everyone else,
so that you can my husband everyone.
Yes, like you know me and my husband.
Let me consult my husband.
Yes, let me consult my husband and other things like that. Yeah, maybe Kadu.
Yeah, I mean, there's all that, but again, I think we just go back to God's created order.
Okay.
Marriage and even sexuality is a gift of God.
Yeah.
And in God's sovereign wisdom, He made us that way, that we need companions.
Yeah.
And actually, if I would just take us back to Genesis, Adam is given, he's working. Of course, the mandate is, cultivate, multiply, till the ground and all that. And he's naming the animals. And then the Bible says that, but for Adam, no suitable helper was found. Now, it wasn't just a companion, but this was someone who'd actually come and help whatever Adam finish and accomplish the task that God had given him, that cultural mandate. And so in that regard, someone said that no one can overturn God's created order. This is it. God made us in a certain way, and so I guess that would be the reason why there's that desire to have someone, because God just made us that way.
It is a legitimate need.
It is a legitimate need and desire that God created in us. But of course, the people say, that's nonsense. I am good. I can be by myself. People say that, but deep inside, I tend to believe that if you run away from worshipping one thing, you'll be worshipping another thing. So you run away from God's created order, you run away from what God set down, you'll find yourself, doing the same thing, just not in the way that God had anticipated. And that's why there's a lot of, chaos with sexuality as is today. We are here. God made male and female, but now we are, we even asking questions like, who is a woman? There's so many genders and stuff like that. So just going back to what God made us, male and female, He created them. And there was a purpose that God gave, for these two coming together. This was a gift from Him. And so, in as much as we want to run away from it, it's just the way God made us.
You are legitimizing those ones who have a desire for marriage, and sometimes the terms and conditions are not conducive to enter into this institution, whether it's because they've not found a mate or what's the other one? For whatever reason, let's say they're not able to enter into that marriage at the time, or maybe they're taking the time to do what Pastor Mimo has encouraged people in, knowing that all those idealistic views of marriage might not really be helpful before you step in. So it might be worth taking the time to re-examine biblically what it means. But I think it might be worth perhaps Pastor Kadu clarifying that we are not saying that, I'm asking, the companionship that we see in Genesis, are you implying that the only place for that need to be, that is inbuilt in us to be satisfied, is only in marriage? And how do you reconcile with, because in the New Testament then we find Paul talking highly of marriage, and also talking highly of the state of singleness, so that even as we were discussing earlier, some of the things that are pushing people into marriage is just because they have wrong ideas of what it means to be, as though you also mentioned earlier that it will not complete you. So perhaps give us a balance to understand that.
So I mean, if we are to, of course, there are people who willingly and voluntarily choose to remain single. And we're not saying that they are missing out on anything. Because again, ultimately, it is only God who can truly satisfy. It is only God who can truly, fill us. It is from God where we get our identity and our security and significance and all these other things. Okay? So marriage is just a gift that God gives us, to sort of help us be who God wants us to become in the context of marriage. Not that if we are not, then we will be, you understand? I mean, I know some really, really people who've been super effective, have been used of God greatly, who chose the single life, and they're just fine,
Even single people are the most committed in church ministry.
Yeah, because they have time.
They have time,
So I'm not saying that, if you truly believe that God has called you that way. But again, Paul says that, he'd rather people get married. Okay? But he says, 1 Corinthians 7, he talks about marriage highly, But again, he says that if you feel that, you're not for it. And the context there is, again, just in the service of God, he doesn't castigate you, he doesn't put you down because you chose this particular lifestyle. But he'd rather you got married. And of course, he gives his reasons, up or evil.
Probably, as Kadu was saying, that part, I found myself just thinking that marriage does not, and this probably I mentioned at the beginning, that marriage does not complete someone in the sense that if you're struggling, if somebody in their singleness is struggling with lust, they had better take care of it, as in take care of their mind, so that they are not in that particular space, because even if they get married, it will not iron out issues. I think it reminds me of what Job says. Job says, I have made a covenant with my eyes not to look at a woman lustfully, meaning that it's not really about it's not about that you have somebody getting into marriage will now make them a different person, and they will, so society might look at them different. For a man, he'll have a social standing. For a woman, she'll be called, you're welcome to the kwa kongamano la mama kwa ile initaje yes. However, apart from that, if singleness gives somebody the opportunity to actually deal with themselves, what is your relationship with God like before you even get into the bounds of marriage? Who are you? Figuring out who are you? What do you like about life? What do you enjoy to do with your? So, what are your hobbies? What are your are you a person who loves to learn, or are you a person who loves sports? So you figure it out, so that all that beauty, at the time where you're getting married, you can be able to bring all this beauty into marriage, so that you're not looking for. I'm not looking for Kadu to make me whole. I'm not looking for him to what is the word? So you hear me? Yeah. So that we are not, because I think that's the other thing. When people get into marriage, they find that this person is not doing the things I thought they would be doing, and the things that they're hoping this person would do are things that God ought to do.
Yeah. Okay, so I think what I'm coming out of this conversation, that I'll be thinking in light of the question that we started with, is to put a high regard on what Scripture says of marriage as the pedestal to work on, because Scripture is realistic as it is challenging to us. Marriage is sanctifying. So let's complete by answering, using that as the pedestal. Is marriage overrated in your view?
So
closing statement.
So before I close, I'm just going to say this. You know, to the unmarried, Paul says, to the unmarried and widows, I say it is good for them to stay unmarried, as I do. That is Paul. Okay? But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry. For it is better to marry than to burn with passion. The problem is people want to say marriage is overrated, you know, and so I'm not going to commit voluntarily to a husband or a wife publicly in a God-honoring way. But then I'm going to seek and pursue what I would ordinarily get in marriage, chini ya maji, you know. And so you don't want the institution, but you want what comes with the institution. I think that is what Paul is addressing himself here too, you know, because in that you're being a thief, you know, you're being a thief, you know. Back to the question of whether marriage is overrated. I would actually say that marriage is underrated. Because God places such a high regard and high value on marriage in the Scriptures. You know, Genesis 2, marriage is God's idea. You know, right at creation, a man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. You know, and you know, they're told to be fruitful and to multiply. And so in that regard, God treats marriage as, you know, as the foundation for human life. You know, be fruitful and multiply, you know, and God is concerned about his image multiplying in creation. Those images are found in human beings. Only the man was made in God's image. And so in that regard, God places a very, very, very high regard on marriage. We actually underestimate and underrate marriage when we say that marriage is overrated.
So for us, your verdict is marriage is not overrated. It is underrated.
Yes, God places
a word.
I would say that marriage is both underrated and overrated. It is both. It is both. Why I would say that is because it depends on who is looking at it. There are those who look at it and they feel, who is asking and what information they have that is informing their question.
And so when we use the Scriptures as the standard and how we perceive it as the different ways that we perceive it, are we overrating it or underrating it?
If we use the Scriptures, then I would say we are underrating it. We look at it and think that it is. I don't know why the humankind really suspects God. That we suspect that if God has said something, they must. He's setting me up for something, and I think it's something that begins from the place of the fall, and so I'd say it is underrated because we then we easily want to squash what God says and say no, it doesn't work that way. However, it's clear that when we follow through with what God says, it works. Yes,
that's a good place to end it.
And actually, before we end, sorry for how does creation, how does the curtain fall on creation? It is with the marriage.
It begins and ends with marriage in the Bible.
So
that's a good point.
creation starts with marriage, ends with Christ as exactly, the church reunited with the Christ. And so just the fact that marriage is also a picture of the intimacy between the Father and the church and and Christ just shows how
we ought to hold
marriage in high regard. That God would actually, at the close of human history, use a wedding, to portray that union with Him.
Yeah,
that's a good one. So trust God, and consider that if the scriptures, the narrative of the Bible is to begin and to end with a wedding, there is a good place there to explore rather than to write it off, to reconsider how we think about marriage. I think that's a good place to end. Thank you for joining us. Until the next episode, have a good day.